Hey everyone, welcome back to your Full Crew podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other co-host. We've got some great topics we're going to be covering today. An autonomous lifeboat. We're going to be discussing some AI editing hardware, some lab delivery or lab sample delivery by drone, and then, of course, the big news of the week or last week is Sam Altman being ousted from OpenAI, and we'll talk about where he landed this morning. So we've got some great guests to discuss these topics today. I'm going to start with Jillian. Jillian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Mike and Dawn, for having me on the Full Crew podcast. Currently, I am the host and producer of the Props Clear podcast. You can see that logo right behind me here. But previously, I was a storm chaser and national correspondent for the AccuWeather Network, going into disaster zones across the country as a one-woman band, and a lot of times writing, shooting, editing, and appearing on camera, telling the stories of the people before, after, and during those natural disasters. And then I've also been a reporter around the world, from New York to LA. I've told stories in Jordan and Kuwait. And I also was an anchor and reporter on Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands, telling those stories as well.
So we're excited to have another podcaster on, but we also do have another great presenter here today. So we got Thomas from Kongsberg Geospatial. Thomas, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm Thomas Jimenez. I'm the market director for unmanned aerial systems at Kongsberg Geospatial. I manage all of the unmanned systems, primarily Iris Terminal. Prior to this, I used to work with drone-in-a-box solutions. I've worked in Latin America, North America, all over the place with clients from varying different industries. And prior to that, I had my own drone services company. So I'm very much in the droney side of things. And again, thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you again. We did a product release with you for Kongsberg, which was actually one of my favorites to produce. So if you want to see that, go check it out is that on our Full Crew channel, Dawn?
It's definitely there, and it's on my YouTube, Dawn Zoldi YouTube channel as well. And I assume Kongsberg has it on their website.
All right, so we're going to get on to the news of the week, and what does everybody want to know about? Sam Altman being fired from OpenAI, ousted by the board. So this is not common in any industry, let alone in Silicon Valley, in the tech sector. But I think the big story here is these unique kind of corporate structures that a lot of these AI companies have set up, kind of backfiring on the profit motive that the investors could potentially have. So OpenAI, unlike or kind of like Stability AI and some of the crypto companies, will set up a foundation, and the foundation was actually where the active board was, whereas the for-profit arm of the business had a fixed cap and was controlled by the nonprofit board. The difference here is usually people set that up as a legal buffer, whereas I think for them, they actually started this organization on an academic principle with some investors like Elon Musk and others to make sure that AI was not closed and only owned by a few companies, a la Google at the time. Was the big concern that Google would own all of AI technology and therefore kind of control the world. Mm-hmm. I think what happened here, though, was the board saw what Sam has been doing rather successfully on the profit side of the business, getting Microsoft as basically the main investor and distributor of their models and technology. And there was a coup. So they took him out for lack of communication. We can only guess what they were assessing would be the results of this, but it looked like they lost a lot more talent in the wake of this decision than I think the board was expecting, even if their decision was to actually kneecap the profit side of the business for what they felt was something going against the principles and directives of the original organization's intent. But Sam has landed just fine. And after a lot of chaos over the weekend, where it looked like he might have even been rehired by OpenAI, they have gone with Emmett Shear as a CEO, and he has landed at Microsoft, who has said Satya Nadella pulling a brilliant business move as always. He's going to be fully supported. So I guess the only question that's left open is, what is Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI contractually going forward? They can't just build these models from scratch if they were not completely shared with Microsoft. So it would take years to possibly rebuild them or kind of retro engineer them, at least months. But if they still have a contract to utilize them, basically this is kind of a best case scenario, I think, for all parties, because OpenAI gets to survive, gets to still have Microsoft as a funding source for the profit side of the business. And Sam gets to go on and do what he was clearly better at, which is running this as a business. So lots of action in a short amount of time, the best type of story we like for early Monday morning. So I'm curious, Jillian, what are your thoughts on all the chaos over here?
Well, I was reading one article this morning, actually, that made a comment saying that this departure and the firing of him is akin to what happened with Steve Jobs back in the 1980s. And so it's interesting just to see those parallels, that as we're entering into what some people are calling the fourth industrial revolution, we're seeing a lot of parallels to what 30 some years ago. And it's surprising, but I'm not surprised. Everything's human nature. Everything's a business call. No matter how much technology has improved, it still goes back to, we're all humans still, even if we're working with AI that's not human,
True. Human drama, right? Actually, that brings up, I grabbed the tweet from Emmett Shear, who is now going to be the CEO, and just kind of goes to show the mentality around AI in the Valley. So unironically, most of the CEO job are very automatable. These are, of course, occasionally key decisions you can't replace. So I guess Sam wasn't replaceable, though, right? So it's like this kind of the truth of the matter is a CEO might not be as important on the individual decisions, the bigger the company, but they can make bad decisions, and actually they clearly need to be there, because in a vacuum, no decisions get made when they need to be. So definitely interesting comparison to Steve Jobs. Although the turnaround of wanting to be hired back was definitely much quicker than Steve Jobs, so that might say something about either of them. Thomas, any comments?
Most, I think it raises just the bigger question. OpenAI is always built to be open source. This raises questions about the ethics. Is this is OpenAI built for the greater good? Is it built with a private mindset, with profit in mind? And this question is going to keep coming up, I think. But it's obviously evolving very fast right now as we're presenting. The OpenAI is the leading brand worldwide. So I think the biggest thing is that this is a huge loss of credibility for them with other players in the market, with Elon coming up with Grok and loads of other stuff. This doesn't look good on OpenAI today. And we've seen that Altman, seemingly, from what I read over the weekend, has shown that he's got the employees on his side. That's there's a huge loyalty on that side, right?
Yeah, and not easy to earn with people this technical, right? So what do you got?
Yeah, I was going to say this article and the one we have coming up, if this was Sesame Street, I'd say this production is brought to you by the letter C, as in communication. Think about this for a second. Strategic communication, number one, they didn't really tell the individuals that were being affected, this board, right? So Altman finds out 30 minutes before, by a phone call from his CTO, that this is all going down, which is just bizarre. None of the employees know. They read about it online eventually, and they don't tell Microsoft. The board doesn't tell Microsoft, their biggest, patron basically and dower of the work. So, I think this was a huge communication bungle. And like you said, Mike, the fact that they turned around so quickly and then said, hey, Sam, sorry about that. You want to come back? It's just really almost mind blowing. I'm thinking you're sitting around a board table making this critical decision with what information? Did they even know that the employees were loyal to this guy? Did they even appreciate fully that Microsoft would be pissed off about this? I mean, and then just the effect to the larger stratosphere, I mean, everybody was talking about this, and not, I know they say, oh, all press is good press, even if it's bad press, but I don't really think so here. I mean, people are looking at this board now and they're thinking, wow, you guys are a bunch of idiots. You lost the guy that co-founded this thing. That's the brains behind this. He just was out there speaking, on the speaking tour a week prior. And, you have a closed door meeting inside to fire him out of nowhere. I mean, I just think overall a huge communications foul, just strategically, the lack of foresight and thinking that went into this whole entire process. It's quite amazing, really, to me.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is that this organization was founded on doomsday principles. And you can't actually dismiss that. Like, Sam himself carries around a backpack. But clearly he's more concerned with money than doomsday, because he's not stopping any progress, right? But a lot of the other people, especially coming from an academic principle for what this organization was supposed to be about, they don't care if they lose Microsoft. They'd rather actually stop the AI apocalypse in their mind. And I think the thing that they have to face now is, you also can't continue the work without the talent. So profit incentives do motivate people. Like, hey, at the end of the day, I got to make my paycheck. Nobody is, no matter what a talented engineer they are, they can't survive without at least some money. So, and I think also determining on which side of the fence you were on this issue, a lot of those engineers might have said, wait, if this goes sideways and I side with the wrong people, I won't be hireable again. I'll look like a kook. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about that's just kind of crowded the whole AI discussion. These are tools. They should be built like tools. They should be assessed like tools, but they're kind of assessed in this metaphysical sense that I think actually led to this problem.
Well, Jillian's got a comment, so I'm going to cede the floor to her, but real quick, there's that saying, keep your enemies close. I mean, if they're so worried that Sam's the apocalypse guy, guess what? They just fired him and lost control over him. Like, if you're so worried about that, you bring the guy in, you have a conversation and say, where are we going with this? Like, we hear you out there talking. We see what you're doing. Like, here's our vision. Are we aligned anymore? But instead, they just pulled that trigger. And they could have, possibly lost an opportunity to win him over and kind of get that back under control if it was even out of control. But Jillian, your thoughts?
Well, I do think it's ironic that ChatGPT, which is tied with OpenAI, is supposed to improve communication for all of us. And then you use the term, brought to you by the letter C, communication. So it's pretty ironic that all of this is going down. You said 30 minutes before he was notified about something that it was a complete communication failure. And then you go and you say, wait a second, people are using ChatGPT to communicate more with people on LinkedIn, to write more emails to their people. So it almost basically is doing the exact opposite of what their company was based on, right?
Yeah. Well, it's totally ironic, but also it's kind of like it reminds me of we were doing some light art down at the PX4 Summit, and one of the engineers joked, this is what engineers look like trying to make art. People were saying, like, turn it 30 degrees. So if this is what it looks like when engineers who can't communicate try to communicate or build a tool to communicate, maybe this is the inevitable result, but hey, I think Sam's going to be just fine. He's not my favorite person, but like, he clearly knows how to wrangle the talent. And I mean, look, Satya Nadella has proven again that he is one of the smartest CEOs on the planet. He's now paying less for the top talent than he was yesterday, right? Because it doesn't have to go through the other organization. They're employees now.
I'm intrigued how the board even thought that this was going to have a. I'm intrigued what their thought process was about how this was going to play out, because I can't see what their roadmap was. It certainly hasn't played out as they thought it was. And like you said, Dawn, if there's no such thing as bad, this is bad press.
Yeah, it's bad for them. They're unhireable, I think, because like the entire investor class has seen this, I think, as an attack on the very principles that lead to their wealth. So, yeah, it should be interesting. I think there's more to tell still, right? Because once the the inevitable documentary social network style film comes out, I think we'll get some insights into what happened in the boardroom.
Well, that was my
should be very interesting.
That was my question, yeah. Mike. Do we think this is completely over? Do you think the drama's over this morning? It doesn't sound like it is.
No, and I'm curious because Emmett Shear has said that he's going to do a full investigation into what's happened with the board. So that means that the board put him in place or members of the board who were probably on like the fence about this, flipped sides and said, no, we need to really evaluate how this went down. Because Emmett is like he's a very like of the era CEO when Silicon Valley was blowing up. So I think he's going to just go through things, and it's going to be rough for a lot of people. They're going to get kind of a light shown on them that I don't think that they were expecting. That's the bigger thing here. Like even the business calculus, like you didn't think this would have any personal blowback. It clearly does. So it might just be because a lot of the people are academic. I don't know, but that this seems like non-business behavior, right? For what is actually a business. So actually, let's talk about Jillian's article, which businesses shifting. So Runway, which actually makes one of the cooler AI, I guess, models out there in terms of what you could produce with it, is now working with a company to put out some hardware. So both confusing and interesting. Let's dive into this.
It was pretty wild, actually, just to see the video of them showing how this works. You can see those 8 screens right there on your screen. They're pretty small, but that bigger one is the one that eventually shows what you decide to pick. It's pretty much a pick your own story and go with it, but it's about the size of a boombox. And like you mentioned, RunwayML, that's the company that provided the software. This other company called Special Guest X created the machine. It's called the first AI machine, and it's supposed to be used video generating to help editors. There's only one of its kind at the moment, one prototype. But what people can do is they can pick a story with dials, they can pick a style with a dial, they pick some music, and then it creates a video for you. I kind of see it akin to the beginning of the silent movie era, where you hear some music, you see some pictures, and it's pretty much just a moving picture. Cristobal Valenzuela with Runway made a comment on Twitter saying that he anticipates that anyone can create movies without the need for a camera, lights, or actors. He said that, quote, they will simply interact with the AIs. Now, what I think is interesting, and we were talking about this before the show, is this is almost exactly what the Screen Actors Guild and what the writer's strike was about for the last, how many months. One of the longest running strikes, or the longest strike in the last 60 years, was about the impacts of AI on the film industry. And so I think this is going to have far-reaching consequences. Yes, this is kind of a rudimentary little box, but I think it definitely holds some promise for some people. I think the hope is that this would augment jobs and not get rid of jobs. I think that is the hope. I saw there were some other articles, one article written by in Variety.com talking about the impacts of AI as a major concern causing that strike. And what they hope is that the next iteration of AI will be augmented intelligence. So they weren't necessarily talking about this machine, but they say augmented intelligence is the idea of companies using software and machines to augment a human worker. So basically not someone taking over the industry. And I think if we can make it so that AI works together with us, it will be a much better synergistic situation instead of just the AI taking over the entire world. So maybe I'm less of a doomsday person. Maybe I'm more of an optimist, but that's what I think is the hope for a machine like this.
Yeah, we actually, Dawn's last Dawn of Drones was with a company who has labeled their AI as augmentative AI with the kind of, I guess, fundamental mission statement that this is here to augment human work. I think it's a better sell, like rather than you'll be replaced, shut up.
Yeah.
No.
Don't you understand this is better, even though it's worse today? You know, that's the thing I don't understand that they're pitching. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this piece of hardware?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far away we are from the hypothetical removal of actors, removal of editors, and so on. But it's assumed that this vision is true and so on. I am of the school of thought that this isn't about efficiency. This will eventually replace people. I'm trying to remember. There's a Canadian guy who wrote a really good book. But I think most AI, in a world where we're talking about inflation all day long, most AI is deflationary. Ultimately, what we're reaching is a solution whereby we will reduce costs as a result of reducing people involved in the same process. We can call it efficiency if we like, but ultimately, I think it'll be the same amount of output requiring less human input. And that goes on to a far bigger picture of, how do you pay the people and universal basic income, and you can go crazy. But I do think that AI, whether this is this example or other ones, goes in that direction of deflationary behavior, and efficiency is also replacing human labor.
Yeah, when I read this thing, my lawyer brain went right to, all right, good luck with this, because I mean, they're literally saying we're going to preload storyboards, like, well, from where? Are you just grabbing them from other movies that people have already written? I mean, this has been such an issue already. I mean, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has come out with a request for information, like, help us craft some rules here, because, everybody's operating in this system where, without attribution, it's like you're stealing someone's intellectual property. And unless they get their arms around that aspect of this, I think it's going to be a big problem. Not to mention just supplanting. And I think what Mike was talking about was Ramel Martinez from ASTN Group and the Valmese augmentative AI. If this is truly supplantive, where we don't need people anymore because we could just make our own movies without any actors, without any musicians, without any background, or having to travel to Canada or New Zealand for a set. Just think about that for a second. That's very significant. Will really rock people's worlds. So anyway, but I think the copyright thing is something that must be addressed in something like this. The other thing that came to my mind is, I don't want hardware, like, that's cool. It's a boombox. I mean, that picture looked like something from old school military. It just reminded, with the little dials and stuff. It looks so, frankly, it looks kind of lame. And, last thing I want to do
like
is
a synthesizer.
Have to buy something like a piece of hardware like I stick on a damn desk somewhere. I want a software like what Kongsberg does, with Iris Terminal. Like, I don't want to have to drag stuff around. I don't want to have to take up space. I want an app. I want a website. I want software to be able to update this dynamically and just use my own computer and not have to buy yet again something else. So the hardware thing is interesting to me. Like, to me, it's old. And I love, Jillian, that you said this is like a boombox. Talk about old school. I mean, seriously.
It's got a handle too, Dawn, in the picture that I saw.
Like, really? Look,
oh, nice.
I don't know if you guys are old enough, but I saw leg warmers in the store the other day, and I'm thinking, holy shit, we are back to the 80s. And, I hear boombox, I see this thing, and I'm thinking, why? Just create a software.
Well, I think I know why. Marketing. Right. So we're all talking about it. And it's something that Runway, I think, has kind of had an issue with, because they actually produce, in terms of video AI products, probably the best generative AI I've seen on the market. Some of the things that it produces are truly like, oh, wow, that feels real. So, but bringing it back to the creator, why would a creator want to use this thing that could possibly supplant them? And I think, again, this supplanting argument is hurting these companies actually penetrate with these products. Imagine that you need to talk about you're a YouTuber and you're a historical YouTuber and you need to talk about a battle that happened, but there's literally no photos or only 2 photos of that thing that ever happened. But you want to describe in full, detail what it was like to be there. This is a tool you could use. And this is a tool that no other, means could get you to that result fast enough for what your budget in terms of time and labor are. So I think that's kind of where these things can be going. But why hardware? Actually, for creatives, there's a whole bunch of lights around me right now. When we set up on Shop, I prefer the buttons. I don't want the software. I don't want it to fail. I want to hit the button and hear the click and know that it's happening, right? Even if it's an illusion, like this camera is 99% software, the tactile nature of it actually does get you to result faster. But I think it's just a marketing ploy because Runway is up against companies like Adobe, which actually produce software where the copyright of everything that is input has been managed. So you upload to Adobe stock, you actually tick a box that says you can use my stuff for AI training, and it's all clear, right? Where does Runway sit if they can't actually get into people's hands? So I think they need to make some noise. And that's what this was kind of about. Secondly, on the copyright issue, remember we learned in that landmark case that the output is not copyrightable because of why? It's no different than just turning knobs on presets, right? So it was basically like saying you can't copyright a radio station, or your movement of turning radio stations. So I think that's something interesting here. Nothing that you would output with this device would technically be copyrightable, especially since you're not even in control of the input. So the copyright thing kind of still stands. Any final thoughts on this before we move on to the break? Jillian?
I actually have a problem with what you talked about with the battle. As a journalist for my entire life, I've done stories where you only have like a couple pictures of a battle, actually based on this story I did, last year. But I'm a realist as a journalist. Like, I don't want to create something to make someone say, oh, this is what it looked like when it didn't actually look like that. So I think with something like this, it would have to be, a futuristic story, or to have to be something that would happen in today's world. It couldn't go back in time.
And I'm a big proponent of this was created by AI too, like some kind of disclaimer or
yes,
because there's too much fake crap out there right now. And when it looks so good and you can't tell the difference, what scares the hell out of me? That Google phone where you could take a picture and you've probably seen the commercial, the kid's glasses are all skewed, and then you push the button and then he's perfect. It's just like, it's just like, come on.
Yeah, but we've been editing photos for forever, and that's a family photo. The consequences are low. But
true.
Yeah, but YouTube, I think, is requiring you to disclose whether or not you used AI. And look, if you think that this is not traceable, especially in video, the pixel movement is going to give it away at some point. Like you might be able to get away with a still image being a composite and hard to kind of figure it out, but once those things start moving, like they're going to give off a signature and a pattern that's going to be easily noticeable, especially if it's a widely used model, right? So I think what's going to happen with any of this stuff, it's kind of like with HR, with all of the resumes and the ability to intake more resumes, and then we scan them. The truth of the matter is, more and more people are seeking talent by person-to-person relationships because there's so much noise that's been created on that side. So if you create enough noise with creative content, I think we're actually still in a good business because it's eye contact, human to human, and we're making it up as we go. I think people will gravitate to that. And on top of that, because there'll be so much noise created for the platforms themselves, they will purposely discount content that is too AI generated because it'll be too noisy for them to kind of manage.
What I'd love to see on your podcast, Mike and Dawn, maybe you can have an avatar giving their thoughts on all of this, powered by AI.
I know. I want a robot. I want a robot that can talk. So
You can have ChatGPT do a play-by-play of what we're discussing.
there you go.
Well, actually, at the Roscon event in New Orleans, they have this robot Pepper that's out there, and basically it's like an LLM attached to like a hospitality robot. So we already have that. She's expensive, too expensive for this show, but I might be able to make something out of what do you call those avatars, and just feed in an LLM. We'll see what nonsense it comes up with.
That'd be hilarious.
We might have to mute it. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break just to thank our sponsors, CSG Strategies, Rubric Law, Centrix, and Aero Vigilance. Thank them so much for making this show possible. Also, the audience for participating. There's a lot of you on LinkedIn today, so feel free to pipe up. We will answer your questions. Our next article is from Thomas. So, MedLife to transport lab samples with drones. Tell us what's going on with MedLife.
So MedLife is a medical services company out of Bucharest in Romania, and they've partnered with Sky Networks. So they're the Australian company. They're a sort of drone integration solutions company. And this is for medical logistics. They're moving, biological samples. They're using the Swoop Arrow, the Kite by Swoop Arrow, which is also an Australian company. So in the core part, the numbers, it makes a lot of sense. There's they're per the article, they're covering a distance up to 120 kilometers. So like for me, I'm in South Florida. That's Miami to West Palm Beach, or for Dawn, that's Colorado Springs to Boulder. So we're talking really considerable distances here. The aircraft is claiming to do 65 knots. So that sort of distance, that sort of thing. So their claims are 50% time saved versus land transport, and the overall response time reduced by 76%. So to me, that's the drone delivery market has been discussed for years. You know, famously, Amazon's been discussing it for years, not been massively successful. But in the drone delivery market, where we've got business to business and business to consumer, I'm a lot more of a bull on the business to business side. I think business to consumer is a little more complicated. There's a lot more variables. Business to business, particularly in medical, we've got defined routes for the most part between two medical installations. The cargo is generally high value cargo, and often, not necessarily always, but often it's time critical. So we've got the building blocks there to get a successful business case, and that's where, like in business to consumer, it's just that little bit harder. We're landing in people's gardens everywhere. There's not defined routes, and maybe we're delivering some Oreo cookies is the value there. So I like the business to business side. I really like medical and business to business, and a lot of players have been working on it. Like Aerial Loop. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in Switzerland speaking with the folks from Aerial Loop, and they've been working in Ecuador. Skyflow, they're working in Berlin. The team at Sprite here in the US, they're doing a great job, and Unither in Canada. But the main thing, they're all doing similar things, delivering medical goods. But one of the key differences is the jurisdictions under which they're operating, right? So when I was speaking to Laura, I think was her name, from Skyflow, she was describing the ConOps in Berlin, and it's so much simpler than what companies in the US are facing. And those regional differences, I think, are going to be the what allow some companies to go faster than others. In fact, Dawn, I think you work with the company in Brazil.
Speedbird Aero.
Speedbird, yeah. So they went to Brazil as well to fly there, right? So there's so much. Those regional differences are allowing some companies to get a lot more airtime, and I don't think that the U.S. model is wrong, by the way. I think that we need to have that airspace deconfliction. We need to have safety for all of us in the airspace, particularly people that are traveling in manned aviation. I just don't think that the solution is endless DAA. It's going to be too expensive. We need to have some sort of solution whereby GA, and I'm also a GA pilot, we got to agree to some sort of conspicuity and something which, if we expect all of the country to litter itself in DAA, it's going to be unaffordable. So we need to find some middle ground there so that these operations can be successful, in Europe, here, South America, Canada, in a scalable way.
Totally agree. By the way, I did an article on Latin American drone delivery. I spoke with Pedro Meneses from Aerial Loop and his kind of Ecuadorian model. And what I didn't quite appreciate, it's not just the regulations; it's also kind of the reason, why it's so important. And in this case, they're all doing the medical delivery in some respect, so the B2B, but the B2C, a lot of those countries in South America, just like in the US when COVID hit, everybody's just delivering things to their house. And in Latin America, a lot of this is by motorcycle, and the accident rates are horrific. And not only that, but the infrastructure, the roads are terrible. And so drones have come out not just through the COVID era, but also because of the current model, which isn't just cars on the road and sustainability and all the, faster and all of this, which it is. It's also a big safety issue for them. And so even on the B2C side, you're seeing drone delivery really taking off in Latin America with Speedbird and, as you mentioned, Aerial Loop. And I wrote about another company called Orchid, ORKID. But the interesting thing, though, Thomas, we always talk about public perception, and that B2C is what impacts the public. The B2B is not transparent to them. It could be in this example that you gave in Romania, where it's laboratory samples. If there's a direct impact to the patient, in other words, you get your results in one day instead of 3 or whatever that is, and then people start feeling that positive impact, I think that will also greatly impact the public perception angle. Generally speaking, the B2B, it's so not transparent to the public that when they see a drone flying over their house, they still think, oh, that thing's spying on me. But even if it's for something awesome like this medical samples, they may not know that, right? So when you can connect the B2B to a direct public benefit and societal benefit, not just, hey, the hospital's saving money, then I think we got something here, something big. I think Jillian has her hand raised.
Yeah, Dawn, I was going to comment and agree with you. And I think the article that Thomas mentioned buried the lead completely. I've been in plenty of newsroom meetings where everyone says, what does it mean for the people that are watching this story? What does it mean for them? And if you look deep into that article, deep into it, like multiple paragraphs in, it goes 50% more time saved compared to land transport, enables the release of test results on the same day. That is so huge. I mean, anyone who's gotten blood work done one day, the first question out of your mouth is, how fast can I get these results? How fast can I get
waiting to hear, Jillian, like, do I have cancer or do I have a horrible disease? And you're just not sleeping for days on end.
Absolutely. So the fact that this would make that response time faster, I think is the biggest news out of this kind of situation.
Didn't Zipline just have their first BVLOS flight this week or last week?
In the USA.
Yeah, in the USA. So that's like a big barrier to this happening all over, right? Because transport to medical facility within line of sight is one thing, but miles, I mean, the benefits to everything from organ transplant to just, like you said, results are very, very clear. And but in terms of what Dawn was saying, I think the public actually already knows about this use case. I'm not sure if it's the one that has moved the needle for them. I mean, they've known about search and rescue use cases. If anything, it's still a lot of anxiety about privacy that goes on. Poor use by law enforcement that makes them apprehensive. But to go back to what Thomas said with the B2B aspect, there's also something in terms of middle mile that's huge and actually does make it down to the consumer, even through a trickle down effect on costs. And I think that's, if we have BVLOS on the register now and we have companies that have racked up flight hours, the FAA just has to move now. They have to figure it out. They are literally the last barrier in this. I understand that, like, yes, we have the most crowded airspace, but they did a very poor job on setting what the benchmarks needed to be for safety. They kept saying, we want more data, we want more data. Well, these things are operating elsewhere now at scale. So you have enough data now. You need to decide what is the meaningful data, you know, to make the decision, because they've made, and the FAA has made poor decisions in the past. Like, I have trouble getting on a 737 these days with that anxiety, but you know.
Well, going to what you said about what Dawn said, yes, they do know the use case, but back to what Dawn said, I don't think the benefits are appreciated today. They know the use case, they've heard of medical delivery, but what does it mean to you or to your family member? And that's the part there, which I think the faster that can get, showcase, or the person can see that, the patient can see the value. 120, I can't speak for Denver, but West Palm Beach to Miami is huge traffic. It's impossible. I-95 is disgusting. So if that is the difference between someone getting those results, we've all, like you said, Dawn, we've all been in that position where you need to know how important this is. A day, can I get this in an hour? That's a game changer. But once that person understands that the drone afforded that, that's, I think, the adoption on a public perception side will be a lot easier.
Well, and I think the businesses or the hospitals in this case, or the medical facilities, can be a part of that message and actually say, you results in 24 hours thanks to drones. Like, and have a little drone with the medical symbol, but nobody's doing that. But, they actually get something out of it by doing a little mini campaign like that, or that awareness to the public, because those drones are flying around those people's neighborhoods, and, nobody's connecting those dots for them. But the companies can, and I don't think it'll be a big outlay for them to do it, to be the cheerleaders. I'll tell you what, when I was in the military and we had Reapers flying over with the California National Guard, flying over the California Rim wildfire back in 2013. You know who sold that to the public? The freaking firefighters were out there. It wasn't military people. It was the firemen saying, we can fight this fire now 24 hours a day, and we don't have to put a person up. This has changed the game for us. And by the way, your houses are safer now. We've been able to put these fires out quicker. And we didn't ask them to do that. They just did it because they were so excited. And I could see where these hospitals can become the spokespeople. They're just not right now. And if I was these drone companies, I would ask them to be, at a minimum, military, we didn't do it, but yeah, that's your business. It's their business. Why not? It's a win-win.
So we have a comment from Matt Genung. He's saying the BVLOS NPRM has been postponed from February to August.
Oh yeah, the FAA already said that. They said that in this August at the FAA symposium. And Congress had had some draft out there of the FAA reauthorization, which of course is not signed yet, where it was within 180 days you'll have this, and we were doing the math. We're like, well, they're already saying we're not going to meet your standard if that becomes the standard. So yeah, August 2024 is just a notice of public rulemaking. And then of course there's the public comment period, which is usually 60 days. And then the adjudication period, which can take about a year, and hopefully no one gets sued like in the remote ID case, because that whole thing,
Well, remote ID has been a contentious rollout from the technology standpoint. The standard, there's kind of two, and then also the requirements don't actually seem to be fulfilling all of the safety goals that I would personally be interested in them fulfilling. But in terms of what's going on with this, pushing it out again, I think the FAA has been accused of playing favorites and kind of keeping the ladder as far up as possible to give it to companies that they trust, so that they didn't have to deal with hundreds of companies. But ultimately, that really did hurt investment here in the U.S. too.
People are dying. Companies are dying, and it really worries me.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't, because 5 years is a long time to put your money up in the the tune of tens of millions of dollars.
And guess what? It's not there anymore. Like those investors, that money isn't so easy to find anymore.
They won't. In fact, Lawrence Meyer, Arterium, that was part of his talk at the PX4 Developer Summit, was even when he was seeking investment, investors were already telling him, we don't do drones anymore. And this is the reason why, because it's not a 5-year outlook, it's a 10-year outlook in the United States. And the truth of the matter is, we're one of the largest markets that you would want to penetrate. So if you're going to take on millions of dollars of investment, you really kind of need us or somebody as large. So I think that's actually probably to the benefit of India and China, right? That seems to be why they are doing much better at this than us. Anyway, we have to move on to the final article. Been very talkative today because I guess we've got some interesting stuff to talk about. So this one is you, Dawn. I really kind of like the brutal efficiency of this thing. Anyway, tell us about this unmanned lifeboat.
Yeah, this is an unmanned lifeboat. This is pretty autonomous, and you can see the little ramp, if you will, that can just bring the person up from the water and I guess somehow flip them into the boat. That's assuming they're like conscious, right? Because I don't think this will work on unconscious people. You have to be aware of what you're doing. It actually has a kind of a voice aspect to it where it can talk to the person and all kinds of stuff. What I thought was really interesting about this was this, let's call it Coast Guard dilemma of, well, gee, the sea is really rough today, or the weather's really bad. Do we risk going out there and saving this person, risk our own lives? And this is in part a solution to that. And I guess it's obvious. I just never really thought about that whole, like, there's somebody drowning, we're just going to choose not to do something about it because it might be really hard to do. I don't know. I guess it does make sense. But I thought this was cool. This has an AI component to it too, since we've been talking about AI. The detection and conveyor belt technologies are in the trial stages, but it has an AI model that detects casualties, meaning people that are drowning, not dead, with a 90% accuracy. So I think that's another aspect I didn't appreciate, how hard it is to find people in the water. And they're training the AI to do that, which I think is really, really interesting. The human eye being as faulty as it is on the horizon, or with sunlight or the water reflections.
So what's the 10% they get wrong, like a sea lion or something?
I don't know.
Ends up in there.
I guess it's hard to find people in water, but this is a really big deal for cruise lines. It wasn't really talked about here.
Oh yeah.
When you think about kind of man, woman overboard, apparently that's a huge issue on cruise lines. Either people purposely doing it, unintentionally doing it. In fact, Mike, I think you and I talked to Cam Shell from Dragonfly, and they had landed a contract with a big cruise line to use their drones for this purpose, and some of the AI that the Dragonfly has put on board. To me, this uncrewed lifeboat combined with a drone, I think is your best case scenario. Just from a distance standpoint and a vantage standpoint. This could be really cool, and again, use the term you said it today already, a game changer, for saving lives. So I'm all for it. I think it's cool, and it's the first time I'd seen something like this. So I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
Well, I think at minimum it's taking Coast Guards out of harm's way during the rescue portion. So even if you have somebody on the boat who could assist in the kind of last mile there, or last inch to get him over in, you've now protected them from being pushed into a potential drowning situation trying to save somebody else. So that, to me, again, I love the brutal efficiency of it. Sometimes the simplest tool seems to work, and a conveyor belt is just the way to go, it seems. Anybody else?
I have a couple of things. First of all, I do wonder if this conveyor belt, if they can adjust it, because it seems like you'd have to perfectly put this, this whole contraption directly near that person, make sure you don't like crush them when this conveyor belt starts moving, to be able to bring them up. In the video simulation that they used, you could see the man that was being pulled up. He was alive and conscious because it was a simulation. His hands were actually off the conveyor belt. So I am interested, because it seems like this is a kind of situation where time is of the essence. And it may take a few hours for this boat to get out to a remote area. That person could become unconscious in that time period. So, they'd have to create this conveyor belt that can move a little bit and adjust to be able to grab someone in case they're not fully conscious. The other thing is, I think it would be cool if we could use or see this kind of technology used in a movie. In a movie like Open Water, I don't know if anyone remembers that movie, where the couple is out and they're getting attacked by sharks and there's a lot of issues and then it gets dark and there's so much happening. It would certainly make that movie a lot shorter. I don't know if the movie would be okay with that.
Well, you could use your little AI box to make it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I think you need some comments, some voices, something. But it might be cool to, if we can take some of these concepts, even just drone, I know drones have been used in TV shows. If you can take an autonomous boat, life-saving boat, and put it into a movie, that's going to get straight to improving public perception very quickly.
Yeah.
True. Saving a life, but also, when the news uses the clip from whatever movie to prove the point, kind of in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I like it on paper. I think the idea sounds great. I think there's, my guess is that if the Coast Guard, if the ocean is that bad that the Coast Guard doesn't want to go out, I'd like to see how the AI system works then, because we're talking huge waves and, ocean spray and so on. So it might not be quite as clear cut as the demos, but you've got to start somewhere, and I like it. And going back to what you said, Dawn, I've actually always thought, I see a lot of cruise ships coming in and out here, and it makes so much sense that when you have a man or woman overboard, you could have a drone in a box that lives, 3 drones in a box that live on top of every cruise ship. The captain hammers a button and these things go out and just drop life rings. That alone is going to probably increase the chances of finding and saving the person. And lastly, I've got visions of this thing going along and picking up a sea lion instead, like you suggested.
You'll have all the PETA people out there picketing, you're hurting our sea creatures.
The sea lion going for a free ride.
Yeah,
that's true, funny.
Hey, if a shark could confuse us with a sea lion, I can easily see this thing doing so also.
Yeah, well, one of the use cases I didn't mention, I made up the cruise line just because I knew about the dragonfly use case. For offshore energy facilities, very remote, and to have one of these things on board one of those facilities that you could just boop, and it goes and it helps somebody, because I guess people fall off these sadly all the time, very difficult, to get them. That could be a really perfect case, and then you don't have to wait, Jillian, for hours for the Coast Guard to show up, because you've got your own, almost like a lot of these energy companies are just having their own drone programs as part of their aviation departments, or otherwise. You put this as part of your toolkit for safety out there, and that could be pretty great.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely buying one for my yacht. So. No, but I definitely do think there's clearly room for improvement, right? They haven't worked out all the kinks or even probably the exact conditions that they can deploy. I do want to circle back on what Thomas was saying about try this in rough water conditions.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, Mike.
Yeah, because look what we saw with cruise and self-driving vehicles. The problem with any of these algorithms is literally edge cases, right? Because they are superlative at finding the linear regression, even if it's a bumpy one. But they're really bad at those outlier conditions. They don't know how to behave. And that's when general programming comes back in. Got to get rules-based kind of behavior baked into it. Then the other thing, I think, just from a purely kind of functional standpoint, do like the conveyor belt, but there probably has to be other things attached to it or other methodologies for pulling the person in addendum to that. Like that really can't be the only way.
Like maybe
'cause
there's
like you
a
said,
life preserver launch. Like maybe there's something like if you think, I don't know, like a catapult on there that can catapult a life preserver, and depending on where you think that person is, maybe you can send it off both sides of the boat to assess for, you know, differences in where that person might be, so that you have two little life preservers flying off the sides of this boat. I don't know. It's just,
I don't know.
yeah, there has to be more, I think.
And my
We have a
lawyer
comment
brain
from-
goes right to, you know, you're rescuing someone and they get injured because their hand gets stuck in the conveyor belt. Now they're suing you, you know. So it's just like, if I was a company that bought one of these, I'd have them, before they were stationed, if that's the right word, on one of these offshore energy facilities, they're signing a waiver, you know, to release liability, that we're going to use this thing, and if you get injured, we're at least saving your lives. Sorry about the broken hand, but you're not suing us.
So we got a comment from Tony Parker. Wasn't there a guy who stayed in the water for some extreme amount of time last year? He fell off a cruise ship. Well, people fall off cruise ships all the time, but I don't know about a specific story.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know about that one, but yes. I mean, there are statistics. That's why, and I forget what cruise line it was, hired Dragonfly for their drones and their AI technology. You know, the other sad fact is people actually go on cruises because they want to commit suicide, and they want to jump off the boat. So that's kind of like that third group of people that doesn't matter if you have one of these things, they're not gonna jump on the unless they change their mind, which sometimes does happen. I just saw I think it's the San Francisco bridge, they're putting like safety nets down now.
I read that yesterday.
Yeah.
But won't you just find something else? I don't know. That's strange. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the city was cleaned for the first time in like 5 years. I mean, they've been having extreme gentrification and poverty issues. I'm not surprised
Yeah.
that they have to put nets up. But anyway, happy note, this thing probably will save people's lives in the future. At least it's
Thanks
a good
for bringing
start.
that back full circle.
yes, let's end on a happy note.
I went down a really
We
dark
were
hole
so
right
close, and then boom, it came. So anyway, Dawn, what's coming up this week?
Well, first of all, if you're in the United States, this is Thanksgiving week. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. That will be Thursday. And because of that, we moved our Drone Law Connections Clubhouse up to today. So if you got the time, join into our clubhouse with Idea Forge. They are a company out of India doing a lot of dual use technologies with their drones. So check that out today with Maggie at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then tomorrow, actually, I'm doing a Law Tech Connect online live stream of our intellectual property. We talked a lot about IP today. We had an amazing panel we talked about PX4 drone, Drone Code Foundation. Ramon Roche is the moderator of that panel. So you can register for that on my website, P3 Tech Consulting, or through my LinkedIn. And then Wednesday on the Dawn of Drones, we have with us Velis Rotors. And they make a really cool drone, a helicopter drone. And they're out of Greece. So great conversation with Maggie last week, and we'll have them on the show on Wednesday. So should be good. Good week.
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank the audience. Sorry, Sheila B, I see your comment, but we're not going to get to it today, but thank you. Maybe one of us will respond later. I want to thank our guests, Jillian and Thomas, for participating. And I also want to thank our sponsors, CSG Strategies, Aerovigilance, Rubric Law, and Centrix. That is it for this week. We are